Alrighty guys, sorry I can't be here today. Hopefully you're all being good for Mr. Webb, as always. Today we're going to talk a little bit about exploration. And we've come out of the Renaissance, and there's this new awakening in humanism and science and technology with guys like Johann Kepler and Galileo and Nicholas Copernicus. And now we're going to put it all together, and it's going to fit into the Columbian Exchange, the Triangle Trade, and the transatlantic economy. But first, we got to have the technology to get us there. And it's sad, but take a few minutes and just talk with Mr. Webb. Look at this map. Like, what do you see here in this map? What are some of the problems, if any, that this map has? And you're going to take a look at it, and this is the known map of the world at the time. And you can see, hopefully, as you're giggling with each other, and it's hard to be quiet when you're videotaping yourself, but you look at this map and you see how crazy and accurate it is. Like, this is Africa, right? This big blob is like Asia and like the Middle East, and somewhere around here is like India, and we kind of know Europe and the Mediterranean really well, but here's England. Is there like a bridge that we don't know that goes all the way over to Iceland? This is the known world at the time. Remember, these are the bozos who mistakenly thought that the world was flat, and if you went too far off of one edge or the other, you would fall off into, space or what have you. So we're going to go to work on fixing this problem, but we need to know how we're getting from point A to point B. Okay? We don't have GPS, we don't have Google Maps, we don't have Garmin. We need to know how we're getting from A to B. And it is the Portuguese, the guys who went down and began trading with Africa, that are going to be behind some of the advancements in technology. And the first instrument that the Portuguese are going to begin to use is going to be the magnetic compass. Now, this will be created way back in China, where you basically have a needle that floated on some sort of liquid, most often mercury. And as a result, the needle would point towards magnetic north, right? Like a compass that you guys would have if you were in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. And with it, a sailor could tell generally in which direction they were traveling. So the compass is pointing north, I'm heading opposite south. All right, so I kind of a little bit know where I am going. Well, by the 1400s, coming out of the Renaissance, the Portuguese are going to develop a device known as the Astrolabe, which you can see here. And what the Astrolabe allows an individual to do is measure the angle of the sun in certain stars, all right? Most often the North Star or the planet Venus in relation to their distance from the horizon. So how far from the North Star to the horizon. And this allows people to keep track of their route and their bearings. It allows them to determine their latitude. Think of moving laterally. So you've got the compass north and south. We now have the Astrolabe, and it's pretty good, but it's not perfect. And then eventually map makers like Jules Champlain and other people are going to begin to use Mercator projection. Now, this is exactly like a modern day map that you may have learned to read, J off to the left and 16, and if you follow where 16 meets J, you find like Des Moines, Iowa, or whatever, right? This is a strange example, but there it is. You can find yourself on an old school map. You have lines running east and west, laterally, latitude, and lines running north and south. It is what like GPS units use. The straight lines cut the globe into sections or squares. So for you guys who grew up with Percy Jackson, knowing what square or grid you're in, let you know your exact location. With Mercator projection comes the sextant. And the Portuguese will combine the technology of the Astrolabe. It'll combine the technology of Mercator projection and the compass to make the sextant. And what the sextant does, it allows you to measure the sun's altitude. You know, you got around noon, the same time every day. And by comparing the altitude of the sun with the ship's known current latitude and longitude, you could accurately place your ship or where you were on a Mercator projection map. And so combining all of these technologies allows cartographers, or guys who make maps, all right, to understand and map the world with greater accuracy. With Portuguese maps, all right, people are now able to travel farther, faster, and safer than they ever thought possible. But now that we know where we're at, and now we have to adapt with sailing technologies. So from the 14 going into the 1500s, and if you think in context, this is the same time as the great gunpowder empires we previously talked about. The Ottomans, all right, the Safavids, and the Mughals running across modern day India, you know, Persia, Turkey, and the Middle East. This is right when the gunpowder empires are reaching their height. The gunpowder empires reach their height shortly after the Aztecs and Incas have fallen, and it's the time where Europe is beginning the transatlantic trade, the Columbian exchange. This is what's going on. So the Europeans, who were trying to play catch up to all the science and technology that they fell behind in during the Middle Ages, are beginning to reach out and go out into the oceans, right? Portuguese had been down to Africa, and they're trying to find out what's there. And the Portuguese are going to be like the ancient Phoenicians, who were the first long-distance sailors, or we call them the phone-home Phoenicians. The Portuguese began to test the waters beyond the known areas of Europe, like the Mediterranean I showed you on that distorted map. And the Portuguese will develop a new ship known as the Spanish caravel, which has this high, rounded bow to split the waves in this flat back, and the 3 different sails on it. And the Portuguese are going to combine the best shipbuilding elements of the time. It was technology taken from old Chinese junks, like the stern post rudder. They're going to take the triangular sail that you could raise and lower and position. I'll do a description of it in class, remind me tomorrow. Known as the Lateen sail that helped the Islamic Arabic dhows, you know, transport the Indian Ocean trade. And they even took the Viking shipbuilding ideas of the high, you know, very pointed bow, and ideas from ancient Phoenicia. And the Portuguese are going to attach all of this to the stern post rudder, the Lateen sail, on the caravel. And this gives them the ability to control their ship in the different winds, all right? Winds and ocean currents, buffeting and pulling and tugging at the ship. You could steer yourself much better. They could actually sail where there was very little wind, and sometimes even using the sails to turn the wind so they could go against the wind. Imagine if you've ever been canoeing or kayaking and you're going up a stream or against the tide. It's almost impossible. So this technology is going to add to the safety and the ability to travel from point A to point B. And this is where the Portuguese are going to come in. So we're going to combine all of this stuff, all right, that we learned in the Renaissance. We're going to use the compass and the astrolabe and the caravel, and we're going to go out into the known world. And the big question is, why do this? Like, what is the big reason? As you can see up here, 3 big reasons, G, G, and G. God, gold, and glory. All right, we're going to go to spread Christianity. We're really going to do it because we all want to get rich, and we can become really, really famous. And the Portuguese are in it to find a quicker route to Asia. And while there is God, gold, and glory, there is the thing where guys are just curious. They want to explore. They want to see what's out there, right? I would love to be an explorer, like fictional Indiana Jones. That would be such a great job. You know, Lewis and Clark going out into the western United States to see things that no one has ever recorded before is a powerful motivator. And you could get rich, and you're doing it for Christianity. So the Portuguese are trying to find a faster shortcut to Asia, to India. They want to take advantage of Indian trading. And as this begins to happen, the Americas are going to be discovered. But trading with Asia, especially India, was a dangerous journey, going all the way down around Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope, and they wanted, Africa to be right there, but it was all the way across India rather, it was all the way across the Indian Ocean. But the money that you could make buying spices and things like silk, ginger and curry, and you name it, if you could get them cheap at the source, pepper, cooking without spices is very bland. That's why people sometimes make fun of British food. It didn't have seasoning, and then bam, now we got salt and pepper, and man, this stuff tastes really good. Well, you got to go and get it. And you could be crazy rich if you trade with India or Southeast Asia. So it was worth the risk, even risking your death. And so Portuguese sailors began to explore the oceans in these tiny little ships. Like if you see a recreation of Columbus's Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, you're like, he crossed the ocean in that? You gotta be kidding me, man. That's just crazy. And part of the reason we're traveling over the sea is because going overland on the old Silk Road is dangerous. Now previously, this had been the only way to take part in trading, right? The only way to get across it. And in the old world where you've got the regional empires going back, to, ancient Rome and Persia and, the Maurya and Gupta dynasty and Han China, it was safe, all right? Now with the breakup of the Mongols, that is a little different. We've got the different Islamic empires in place here. And it's more dangerous and difficult than ever before to make the overland trading route. Plus, with the ship, you could carry more cargo a lot faster. So the Portuguese, aided by this great shipbuilding technology, allowed them to travel not only around Africa, but eventually out into the Atlantic Ocean. And this is all going to be done by the benefit of Prince Henry over here, not our own Henry U, but Prince Henry the Navigator. Prince Henry is going to kickstart this whole thing in the early 1400s, and he gets known as Prince Henry the Navigator. And he reads some information on a very, very, very wealthy African king who was a Christian known as Prester John. And keep in mind, we've heard stories about some king in Africa so rich he gave away all of his gold, whose name is Mansa Musa. And Henry wants to help Prester John combat the spread of Islam. All right, we're Christian king to a Christian king here. but also he wants to be able to tap into, to be the first one to get a direct source into the African gold trade. Man, they got a lot of it down there. Let me get my hands on some of that. So to help him succeed in this venture, Prince Henry is going to set up schools. He gathers scientists, and he gathers map makers, and he goes out and recruits successful, well-known, and brave sea captains and says, guys, I got a little plan here. And he put these three groups together and said, it's like a think tank. I want you guys to figure out ways to make this safer, better, and faster. How can we make increasingly longer voyages from Portugal? And so eventually, they're going to begin to leapfrog their way around Africa. All right, we're going to go the unknown down here below the Sahara Desert. We're going to go around the Cape of Good Hope, and we hope that Madagascar is India, but wait, it's over here. And so what began to happen is, here in first period, Max would go out for 30 days, and at day 15 he would record where he is, and he would turn around and come back. And then Kevin would go out for 60 days and turn around at 30. All right, and then Taryn would move on, and he would go for 90 days. And by the time we go through second period all the way to third period, where we've got Matthew doing this and Lars doing this, we're going to go all the way over to Owen and the Nicks over here, and they're going to go 30, 60, 90, 120, 180 days, and they're finally going to leapfrog. They'll know how much supplies to carry. They're going to chart the coast of Africa, and they're going to set up trade depots. And as they do this, they're going to catalog the information. How long does it take? What are the currents like? Unfortunately for Prince Henry, he dies while the voyages are still going, the leapfrogging voyages are going farther and farther and farther south. But after his death, his schools keep up this mission. And they discover the dangerous Horn of Africa, where you've got the Atlantic Ocean current, you've got the Indian Ocean current, and Antarctica down here, water compressed by 3 parts of land. It's very, very, very dangerous. Now known as the Cape of Good Hope, and I always say it's called the Cape of Good Hope for 2 reasons. Number one, you pray that you made it around, like you hope that you made it safely. Number two, you hoped you got rich. This was a quicker route to Asia. And just as the Portuguese get going, and we know they come over here to the east coast of Africa where they cause a lot of destruction with Islamic Indian Ocean trade, this is now a competitive business. Like you soccer guys and European Major League Soccer, this is cutthroat. And if the Portuguese are getting in on it, well, right next door is Spain. And the Spanish are going to come in and introduce great competition to this mix. Right? The rulers of Spain do not want to lose ground to their Portuguese neighbors. So they decide that they are going to enter the long-distance trading business themselves. And so they do. And so what's going to happen is the Spanish are going to look out and recruit sea captains, and they're going to come up with and hire the Italian sailor Christopher Columbus. And he will be sent out by the famous King Ferdinand and, there it is, there's my information on Prince Henry dying in 1460, and I forgot to change the PowerPoint. And you hope you made it around Africa, and you hope you made it to Asia, and you got rich. So I'm going to back up a little, fast forward here. We have some Spanish competition. Columbus has got a crazy, different, just way outside the box daring plan. He's got a new idea of how to find riches. His idea is that he wants to sail west. And I'm not going to go south around Africa. I think I can get to Asia if I go due west. Well, Columbus, you can't do that, dude, because you're going to fall off the side. He's like, no, that's stupid. This is what we're going to do. Going west is your shortcut. We will bypass the dangerous trip around Africa and we'll get there faster. Buying into this, again, are the famous King Ferdinand and Isabella, who've got several motives here. Number one, they were looking for new sources of revenue. They wanted to get rich. So they agreed to finance Columbus's trip. Part two, they also wanted to spread Roman Catholicism. All right, the Protestant Reformation is ongoing, and they want to take their devout Catholics, they want to take the word missionaries over into this new area. Their main goal, however, is to cut out the middleman, like the Islamic merchants, all right? So they could dominate the trade routes. What happened was Islamic merchants would buy goods cheap at the source, transport them over and trade them with the Europeans, but they had to increase the price for their time, for their effort, and for their labor, right? It's like going to Costco or Sam's Club, all right? You're not going to the Walmart or the Target to get your item. You're going right to the warehouse. So you got to buy in bulk, and you have your 5-gallon bucket of Jif peanut butter or a 4-pound box of Reese Puffs, but it's cheaper. The problem is you now got to eat 5 gallons of peanut butter and 4-pound box of Reese Puffs, but it's cheaper. But if we're going to cut out that middleman and we're going to get it direct at the source. This decision to dominate trade routes tells them, hey, here we go, we're going to send off Columbus, and whether you love him or you hate him or you talk about we're not going to deny the hundreds if not thousands of natives that Columbus killed. It did happen, you can't deny it. And was he in India? Absolutely no. But he made it to the New World and back, and he recorded it. Is it highly conceivable that others made it? Yes, you guys know my affinity for the show on Tuesday night, The Curse of Oak Island. Not real hard to think that other people made it over here. Vikings, whomever. Not, Leif Erikson. But Columbus comes over, records it, and makes it back. And going across, not, talking about the death and destruction, but he set sail with those 3 little ships. And it was a daring enterprise. It was not easy. On August 3rd, 1492, Columbus sails with 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And after a rough voyage of nearly 2 months in storms and dehydration and his men getting angry, Columbus finds land on October 12th in what is today the Caribbean Sea, the Hispaniola, which is the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And he's still looking for China, and he sails all over the Caribbean. He's like, oh gosh, where am I? Oh. Was he anywhere close to Indian China? No, he was not. But he thought he reached the East Indies, all right, the South Pacific Islands. And so he begins to call the people the Indians, which that's where he thought that he was. And then he records this information and he returns to Spain. He is a conquering hero. And just beside, if you ever go down here, they got a huge shrine and memorial to him. People think that he's buried there. They kind of love him, which you're like, this is crazy. But anyway, he will return to the Americas 3 more times, always incorrectly believing that he was in Asia. However, shortly after his death, Europeans realized that this was a whole brand new world. And lines of influence were quickly drawn up between Spain and Portugal, and almost causes a war between England and Portugal. I mean, this whole thing gets nasty very fast. Pope Alexander, the Pope actually had to step in to prevent a war between Spain, Portugal, and England and other people. So Columbus goes to the New World and he makes it. We're like, woo, awesome, all right? We're going to back up a little bit here now, talk about two others. Bartholomew Diaz, 1488, he's the first original Portuguese sailor who wants to reach Asia by sea. And he tries to sail around Africa, and he gets just around the Cape of Good Hope, and he runs out of supplies, and he had to turn around and go back. He was one of those leapfrogging missions. He almost made it, but not quite. And that gives way to the famous guy, Vasco da Gama. And Vasco, in my mind, is just a brilliant, brilliant guy. 1497, Vasco da Gama travels around the Cape of Good Hope. And here on my map is a little bit of the leapfrogging missions that guys were taking, going up the coast of Africa and then over to India, following the Islamic trading routes, what they were destroying. But we already know that. So, da Gama makes it all the way around Africa. Right? And it's a dangerous journey. And on his way over, he loses several of his ships. He also lost many sailors due to thirst and to hunger, and what we now know as scurvy. Ah, you scurvy dogs, army matey. All right, speaking like a pirate, which we now know is a vitamin C deficiency. Even with the loss of men and ships, when his fleet goes over to India and makes it back, the amount of money that was made, if you invested, was astronomical. I mean, he was rich, crazy beyond belief, as were all of the investors. And da Gama makes so much money, you would think, man, he's just going to sit. He's going to sit on it. He's made a lot of money. This is awesome. But he reinvests that money. He immediately outfits a new fleet of ships that he owns, not investors, and sends them right back out. Excuse me. This time, da Gama left behind willing Portuguese merchants in India. They rented warehouse space. When things came in, whether it was, tea or ginger or whatever, they could buy it cheaply at the source and store it. Whether it was, jewels, spices, pepper, whatever, they could leave it there. And then 6 months or so later, when da Gama's ships returned, they picked it up and sailed back to India while guys were there purchasing, making money. And this is going to be the origin of what will eventually become the joint stock companies. We'll get into the Dutch East India Company and the British East India Company. But da Gama really kind of starts this whole thing. By the year 1502, Portugal has become so crazy wealthy that other European nations begin to copy their model and build outposts to support international trade, which as I said, begins the vast trading empires, the most famous of which are going to be Spain and then England. So, da Gama does it. So we just did, I kind of get myself, mixed up here and there. And everybody wants to get into the game. England, we know, spits, fault, cheerio, God save the Queen, spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. England wants to get into the game. And Spain and Portugal are a little bit farther south, so a British guy, John Cabot, says, well, shoot, if Columbus is going this way, I can find the Northwest Passage. I will find the all-water route around North America, Greenland, and gets up in here. And the problem is, man, it's really, really, really cold. And there really is no all-water route. But John Cabot tries to find it for England. Unfortunately, for him, it does not work out. And this guy that the Americas are named for, all right, Portuguese, sailing for Portugal is Amerigo Vespucci. And he's going to come over here and he's going to kind of look, at the routes of Columbus, and he's going to deviate a little bit. He gets caught in some storms and his guys are getting angry at him. But he's a solid guy. And he's the first to sail around like the Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, down here into South America, and he realizes, wait a minute, Columbus is crazy. This isn't, all right, India, this is a new world. And so the Americas, North and South America, are named for him. He figures out that this is literally like a, Aladdin and Jasmine, a whole new world. And so by this time, if you remember that earlier map, now we have this one. It's getting better, but it's far from great. All right? We got Europe really good, the Mediterranean. Africa now is looking much better. Still don't know what this is. And India is still kind of, I don't know, here's Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia and Australia. So we're getting this part better, but Asia is still not real good. And here is North America, Central America, and South America. Not super accurate, but it's better than it was originally. And now we get to the granddaddy of them all. He gets a lot of airtime. I will give him credit for being brave, but I'm not really sure how smart my man was. Ferdinand Magellan, Spanish sailor. He undertakes what is, in my mind, arguably the most fantastic and dangerous voyage of exploration that there was in human history. He does something incredible. I just wished he would have finished the race. Magellan is influenced by guys like Columbus and by da Gama and even John Cabot and others. And so the king, Charles of Spain, is going to finance Magellan's quest, his ideal for an all-water route through the New World. Not just to the New World, but through it and over into Asia, this mighty Pacific Ocean, excuse me. And so Magellan is going to go around and he's going to interview sailors. And this is a cosmopolitan sailors from Greece and the Middle East and Africa and Europe. Didn't matter where you were from, he was going to take you if you fit his profile. And he's going to wind up taking 250 men and 5 ships. And it was awesome. He figured the voyage was going to take about 2 years, maybe a little more. So when interviewing, the guys would say, how long is this going to take? I don't know. Well, where exactly are we going? And he said, well, I can't tell you that. You still want in. If we make it, you're going to be rich. And guys, without knowing where they were going or how long it was going to take, 250 guys said yes and were picked. And they head off in 5 ships in this crazy multicultural sailing crew. And they leave on September 20th, 1519. So, September 20th of last year, just a few months ago, all right, was the historic voyage of 1619, 1719, 1819. It's 500-year anniversary of Magellan's voyage that he's about to start. So Magellan goes out and there's difficult storms and they run out of water and his men are going to mutiny. And much like a trick that like Columbus used, he said, well, I'm the only one who knows how to navigate and get us back, so you guys can't kill me. And then one of their masts break on their ship and they've got to pull over in South America and find a new tree trunk so the ship's carpenter can fix it. And there are all of these problems. But when they get to South America, they begin to explore. They begin to see new things and new people. And then they get to the coast around South America, in a little area known as the Straits of Magellan. And man, this thing is nasty. And it's stormy. It's just like rounding the Cape of Good Hope back in Africa, but it's the South American version where there's Antarctica and the ice flows and your Tierra del Fuego and mountains and rocks. And off the coast of Argentina, he goes around it in November of 1520. Now there's a sea route through there known as the Straits of Magellan, and despite this violent, nasty, stormy weather, Magellan and his crew make it over into the vast Pacific Ocean and into the unknown. There's an old Russell Crowe movie called Master and Commander, where it kind of shows this turbulence and a guy falls overboard. If you remind me, I'll show it to you. It's just crazy. Now, unfortunately for Magellan and his crew, they really had no idea how big the Pacific Ocean was. The biggest land feature on the planet Earth is the Pacific Ocean. They think it's like the Atlantic, and they turn left in probably the worst possible point. They're going to miss all the Polynesian islands and the rich islands of the South Pacific, and they go across the Pacific right in between where there's just absolutely nothing. 4 months, they run out of food and water and they can't catch fish and they're eating like boot leather. They're starving. The soldiers finally land in what is today the Philippines. And while they're there, they are able to spread Christianity, and the natives kind of nurse them, back to health, give them food and like water. And they go, hey, since we helped you guys, there's this neighboring tribe that we're going to go to war with. You guys got these cool thunder sticks. Can you help us? And Magellan and his boys say, yeah, sure, to help you out. And unfortunately, in this tribal battle, Magellan is killed in these fighting between Filipino tribes. But even with their leader gone, the men plunge onward. They get to Southeast Asia, China, better known trade routes. And on September 8th, 1522, almost 3 years to the day, they make it back. All right, well, just a little over 3 years. They make it back to Spain after circumnavigating the entire globe. Magellan doesn't make it, but he gets credit for it. And now that we've circumnavigated the globe and we've gone around here, here's the Straits of Magellan, and we turn left and we come all the way over here to the Philippines, we now have a much better, more reasonable map. Australia is there, the Philippines, China, India. Now we get an understanding, and all the goods, from Africa, from India, spices, the Caribbean. We're having all these goods being shared back and forth, and it's the interconnectedness now of Africa and Europe and Asia have migrated outward. The Americas are now incorporated into the world economy. It's now a global economy, hence the transatlantic trade. And this impacts the entire world. Not only the natives, but especially, Europe and the natives in the Americas. It is going to take Europe, that was in the bottom of the barrel during the Dark Ages, and fast forward them, rocket them to become the most powerful continent on the planet Earth. They are going to control more money and more resources than ever before. Not to be left out are the Dutch, the Netherlands, unlikely rivals for sea power. Kingdom of Portugal was dominant at sea because of their large head start in exploration with Prince Henry. But it's this tiny small country on the North Sea in Northern Europe that becomes very powerful. They rose and actually challenged the dominance of the Portuguese and even the Spanish and the British for a while. The Netherlands had been connected as part of the Great Spanish Habsburg Empire. And then in 1599, a Dutch fleet returns to the Netherlands, after a long absence in Asia. And when the fleet returned to port, everybody who invested in it made crazy amounts of money. The profits were like 1,000%, if you will. Seeing the amount of money that these guys who invest, you get $10 and all of a sudden you got 1,000 or 10,000. Everybody wants in. This is the best get-rich-quick scheme ever, better than anything on the Shark Tank. And so the Dutch begin to build and equip a dual-purpose fleet. Number one, the fleet is going to be built for trade, but also defended and equipped for battle against probably the Portuguese. It's like the old Greek trading ships that Themistocles had built after the Battle of Marathon. The Dutch want to set up these trading colonial outposts like Vasco da Gama had done for the Portuguese. So the Dutch are going to steer away from the mighty Spanish armadas. They're just going to fill that void, that nook and cranny. And they start a settlement in what is now Cape Town, South Africa. We know about that. You know, we talked about Africa, the Dutch colony, and the Khoikhoi. And it was designed as a resupply area to resupply with food and water for the trip around the Cape, and also as a repair depot in case the ships needed some repairs. Well, all of this by 1602 will turn out these guys who had become crazy rich from this trade with Asia create the Dutch East India Company, or the DEIC. And the DEIC is a group of guys caught in a duel with Portugal for money. They wanted to be power elites like the Spanish and like the Portuguese. So they traded with the Chinese. They go over into China. They're able to monopolize trade with Southeast Asia. And the Dutch had a lot of success because they weren't intrusive. They didn't maim and kill. They built alliances with the native populations, then try to bully them and take them over, except for the Khoikhoi. Some of the Dutch are going to assimilate into the native culture. Some of them will marry natives, and all this helps build relations. And unlike the Spanish and the Portuguese, the Dutch are not so much bent on religious conversion as they were trade. There's no large missionary push for conversion out of the Dutch. They just want to make money. They wanted access to trade goods, and they want to become crazy rich, which they do. Now, on that point, if you've seen the old movie Ocean's 12, one of the things that Danny Ocean and his guys are trying to do was steal an original stock certificate from the Dutch East India Company. If you invested in that, man, you got rich fast. So the effects of all of this, while the Portuguese, the Spanish, and the Dutch were out exploring and trading and traveling, two great European powers are beginning to stir. All right? One of them is going to be England. All right? And the other one is going to be France. Bum, 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 God save the Queen and all that. And for you, Dimitri, parlez-vous le français? England and France, the two heavyweights of Europe, are going to begin stirring. And they're going to be heading towards North America, competing for trading dominance. Wealth is almost guaranteed with things coming from the New World, and a new age of monarchies is going to be born. The monarchies in Spain and France are going to have access to dreamed of sources of money and raw materials, and this will allow individual monarchies to dominate, the greatest of which is Louis XIV, the Sun King, and Versailles. This is going to lead us to the age of absolutism, which we are going to cover here shortly. So that's it, guys. Thanks for listening. If you guys need this PowerPoint, let me know. I'll also throw this up on YouTube when I get back Friday. Thanks for listening and being good for Mr. Webb. All right. See you guys tomorrow.